Okay, so like Josh said, my name is Kelsey Romney. I'm so excited to be here today to talk with all of you about backyard chicken raising. It's one of my absolute passions, and I love talking about it with people who are interested. So the first half of this, we're going to talk about the chicken or the egg, chicken breeds and egg production. Everybody kind of gets into chickens for a different reason, and that's kind of up to you. It's a personal thing. It's what makes it exciting and fun. And you can decide whether it's egg laying, chicken breeds that you're interested in, different colors of eggs, whether they're friendly or pets, whether they're hardy outside, whether they clean up pests in your yard, all different kinds of things that you could be interested in order to get the right breed that will fit your needs. So I want to show you one way that I like to find what will work best for you. This is just one hatchery. So there's obviously a bunch of different hatcheries online. You can pick any one that works best for you. But this one is a great example to show you that we have right here all these different things that you can filter from for what you're looking for in a chicken. So you can say, okay, I need one that is best for families. What's going to be really friendly with kids around? Or you can say, okay, I need something that's cold because we're here in Utah and winters can be rough. So what's the best kind of breed that I can look for with that? And that way you can filter down. And then if you want to, you can click on a chicken and read all about what it is, where it comes from, what color eggs it might lay, watch a whole bunch of videos about it on any hatchery's website. So this one is great. It's reputable. I've used it myself before, but I'm not endorsing one specifically. So you can use whichever that you would be most interested in. But what I recommend is use these filters to find exactly what you're looking for in a chicken or in a flock, and then see if they're rare or if your local farm store sells them. Your local stores are going to have them in different breeds every year, and usually they come out with a list ahead of time to tell you what kind of breeds you can expect from the store. A lot of them have certain rules, like you could only buy 3 minimum at a time. So keep that in mind when you go to your local stores. And you can order these online. They're a bit more expensive, and sometimes the shipping can be tough on them, but they usually all arrive alive and healthy. So you can do either of those options, but like I said, I recommend filtering and then going to your local store unless it's a really niche specific breed that you want to try to buy online. Okay, so the other part is people always, let me get this going here. People also kind of decide if they want all a matching flock or if they want one of every kind or whichever you want to do. I think if it depends on what you're looking for specifically to get started up, but a good number, if this is your very first time to buy, is between 3 to 5 chickens. 3 would be the bare minimum that I would recommend, but you could go 3 to 5 to 7. But once you get up to those numbers of 10 and more, you have probably more eggs than you'll ever need in a single household. And it's a little bit higher in feed costs, a little bit more waste that you have to clean up and that kind of thing. So kind of 3 to 7 is a good number of chickens to get started with. Okay, I'm going to skip through these breeds because, like I said, you can find them online. But I'll save those because if you have questions at the end, I can go back and show you more specifically. The bantams are a miniature version of almost every chicken breed, definitely almost every standard breed. They have the miniature version, which are bantams. They're really fun. Something to keep in mind is they lay smaller eggs. You need to be careful if you have a crowded coop to also add a bantam because they can get picked on by bigger chickens. And that if you buy a bantam at a store or online, they cannot be sexed at a young age because they're too small. So you got a 50-50 chance of ending up with a rooster bantam. But they are really fun. They're great for pets. They're fun with kids. That's what kind of the scoop on bantams. Okay, roosters are, first of all, you do not need a rooster to have your hens produce eggs. Hens will produce eggs whether you have a rooster there or not. They will only be fertilized if you do have a rooster. So if you plan on hatching eggs of your own, you're going to need a rooster. It's going to depend on what you have for your city requirements and limits. Most city limits do not allow roosters because they are too loud. Roosters are tricky because you never really know what you're going to get. Sometimes you get them that are very loud in the middle of the night for no reason, and sometimes they're really good at waiting until the sun comes up to start crowing. It's kind of just luck of the draw. I don't even think it's particularly by breed. You just kind of get some that work really well and some that don't as far as sound and aggression goes. Definitely some breeds are more aggressive than others, and you want to keep a close eye on that. It's very, very rarely worth keeping a very aggressive rooster. One of the things that's nice about a rooster is that they are really good for predator protection for your coop. So if you have a neighbor's dog kind of run into the yard, all the hens will run away and a rooster will run towards that dog or towards that predator to try to protect the hens. So that's one of the biggest reasons that I keep a rooster around personally is I live somewhere where there's a lot of wildlife predators, and I plan on losing a rooster at least once every year or two because I free range my chickens, and I know that that's who will probably be taken by a predator first because they're trying to protect the rest of the hens. So that is one advantage to keeping a rooster around. But like I said, you kind of have to decide what's your limits for keeping a rooster, not just within your city limits, but within your personal requirements, whether you'll keep one that's semi-aggressive or not. For us, I have kids around. The option is no aggression. As soon as I have an aggressive rooster, he's out. The other thing to keep in mind is that if you decide to hatch your own clutch of chicks, you're going to have half their roosters. So just have a plan for getting rid of those. Okay, molting is a very common thing. This happens every year for chickens. It's very common for them to all kind of start. So usually you have one that starts and then the rest of your flock shortly follows. They'll lose all their feathers. They'll stop laying for a short time, and they might look really sick if you're not expecting it. So understand that this is a very common thing. It happens generally in the very late summer or early fall, and then right before it gets cold, they all feather right back up and they look great for winter and they're nice and warm. So you can keep an eye on it. This is what they can look like when this first happens. Okay, brooding is when your chickens start laying on eggs. Sometimes you want them to, sometimes you don't. If you don't want your chickens to start trying to hatch out a clutch of eggs, I would recommend taking them off of the clutch, getting them in the sunlight, getting them fresh food and water away from the nest, usually like a pet carrier kind of works, out in the yard or out somewhere away from the coop to help them break that habit. Okay, spring and fall and winter. So to keep your chickens laying all year long, the light is the key. So it's not temperature based, it's light based. And it depends on what you want to do. So some people like to give them a break through the winter. I personally like to let my chickens kind of go with the natural season and let them have a break. It changes your egg production lifetime for each chicken, and also it changes the color and richness of the eggs. So it gives them a little bit of a break to restore their production, and then in the spring they come back a little bit stronger. However, if you want to keep them laying, that's totally fine, especially if you plan on using those chickens for meat chickens later on in their life. So you keep them for egg production for the first 2 years, and then you end up wanting to use them as meat chickens afterwards. Then having them lay throughout the winter definitely makes sense. You want to have at least 14 hours of daylight level of light in their coop on them. So timer works best. You can use a heat lamp. I will say heat lamps are pretty dangerous. They can cause a fire very quickly. So pretty much everything in a chicken coop is flammable, from their feathers to the bedding that they're on to the straw and hay. All of that is flammable, and we see them burn down all the time. So I would recommend using a light. You can use a solar light that's on a timer. You can use just a regular light bulb in your coop. That's a little bit safer than an actual heat lamp. Most of the time in Utah, you don't need actual external heat, like an added heat source for your chickens, as long as you have a coop with the right specifications, which is what we'll talk about in the next half here. So I'm going to keep going here to eggs. So I love chicken eggs. This is the reason that I raise chickens, because I love all the different colors that they can lay. So you want to decide when you're picking out your chickens, do you want high producers? Do you want color producers? What are you looking for exactly? All the Mediterranean breeds you're going to notice are going to probably be your better layers. Like you're going to get a whole bunch. The white leghorns are the ones that you're going to get 2 eggs possibly a day from. You're going to get a lot throughout the laying season, especially in the summer. So in the summertime, you might get 2 eggs a day from those one chickens. And then in the winter, as it slows down, you might get one every other day kind of thing. I'm going to show you here. So like I said, lighting takes 14 hours a day to have good. You can get up to 16 hours in a 24-hour period. And we have covered all of this stuff as well about you don't need a rooster for egg production. And that if you have those 4 or 5 chickens, that you'll get 2 to 4 eggs a day during the production cycle. And usually throughout the spring and summer, you're going to have more eggs than you need. You'll be giving them away to neighbors before you will have before you don't have enough eggs. So when you have that many chickens, it works very well. They can lay up to 10 years. That's your high producers. Generally, they lay more 5 to 7 years, depending on the chicken, just kind of on average. As they get older, their production will definitely decrease, and they start laying in that 5 to 7 month range on average. If you get more of a specialty breed that's bred more for the way they look, like they're the Polish chickens with the big puffy feathers, then you might actually wait till the next spring for them to start laying because they're maturing through the summer, then they hit their fall molt, they shut down for winter, and then they start their first round in the next spring. That's your more fancy, like I said, feathered chickens, where if you just get more of the standard breeds, you can expect it in 5 to 7 months. Good laying hens will lay about 20 dozen eggs a year in her first year. And then, like we said, they'll break into molt. Okay, egg color. Like I said, it's one of my favorite things to talk about. There are 4 basic colors in egg production. There's white, blue, brown, and green. The process of coloring eggs in the chicken is kind of like a printer as the eggs develop. The ink, that you could call it the ink, is applied at different processes, at different stages of the 5-step process from the ovary to the oviduct. So all chicken eggs start white because they're made of calcium carbonate. And then if you keep going, the next step would be blue if the chickens have that breed. So your egg color is going to be reliant on your hen's chicken breed. So you have some that lay, and that's one of the filters that you can filter out on that hatchery site that I showed you at the beginning. Trying to watch my time here. So the blue is the next stage, and blue starts early enough in the egg production process that actually permeates the entire shell. So if you crack a blue egg open, the inside is blue. The brown pigment, so here is a blue egg, brought one with me. This is a blue colored egg, okay? The brown eggs, this is a lighter brown, you can see. That starts later in the production process. So because the brown is applied later, it actually does not permeate the shell. So if you crack open a brown egg, you end up with a white egg on the inside. Green happens when a chicken has both the blue gene, so the egg is blue, and then a brown coat goes on top. So if you crack open a green egg, which looks like this, crack open a green egg, the inside is actually blue. So that's kind of a fun little thing that you can watch for as you start getting colored leg chickens. White and brown legs are definitely the most prolific layers, which is why that's what you will see when you go into a store. Generally, you can buy white and brown. And then another benefit of a homegrown chicken egg is that you have added bloom. So you can keep chicken eggs unrefrigerated for up to 2 weeks if they're fresh from your coop without washing them. When you wash a chicken egg, you're taking off the protective bloom that is naturally over the egg. So if you look at this right here, this is an egg with bloom already on it. See how it's a bit cloudy? If I wipe this off, you can see that it changes colors almost, right? It changes from that bloom side. This is no bloom. This one has bloom. You can actually sand this down to a white egg, which is pretty crazy. But the more bloom you have on your eggs, and if you don't wash off, it protects that from anything entering the egg, and you lessen your chances of salmonella infection. So that's one of the benefits of having homegrown chicken eggs. The chicken eggs that you buy in a store are generally almost 60 days old. So if you think about how much fresher yours are from the ones you're getting at the store, that's also kind of an added benefit. So when you crack open a chicken egg, you get it, you're so excited, you get your first egg from the coop and you're like, yes, I can't believe it's this color. It's such a magical feeling to raise these from chicks. And then all of a sudden in 5 to 7 months, you walk out and find a beautiful egg. You bring it inside and you crack it open. There's a couple of things that you can find. The blood vessels that you can see, they kind of look like blood spots on this top egg right here. Those are definitely not a fertilized egg, okay? Those are actually just ruptured blood vessels that happen during the formation process. Totally normal. They get candled out from the ones that you buy at the store and tossed. So normally you would get these, but they get filtered out before they show up to the grocery store. This egg down here is actually what a fertilized egg looks like. So you can see this little tiny spot right here. That is the very beginning of a fertilized egg. And if you have a rooster, you will likely see this in your eggs. Some people prefer not to have that. Some don't care. So you can do what you want. You can scoop this part out. You can scoop this whole egg out. You can not eat this one, whichever you want to do. But that's just a couple of things you can expect from your chickens. The other thing is you're going to see a lot darker and brighter yolk from a homegrown chicken, a backyard chicken, than you would from a store-bought egg. That has mostly to do with the type of food that they're eating, especially if they're free range in your backyard. So all those added insects, all those little plants that they're eating, everything along the way that they're scratching and foraging for helps add to that color of yolk. Different darker yolks does not mean more nutrition for you. I'm biased and I say that it tastes better. You can kind of ask around, but it definitely doesn't change the nutrition content from the ones that you buy in the store. They're just fresher and I think they taste better. Okay, I'm going to move on to raising chickens. Okay, do you want me to pause now for questions or do you want me to wait for the very end?
It is whatever you'd like to do.
Okay, I'm happy to answer some questions now.
You want to answer them now?
Sure.
So the first question is, aside from a rooster, this comes from Haley, aside from a rooster for protection, any tips for predators if you want to have your hens free range?
So a lot of people will talk about creating like a big pen for them and then trimming their wings. I recommend a large pen with a big fence if that's a possibility for you, but I would not recommend trimming their wings because generally they can still kind of fly and they'll hop out, but they won't be able to get back in when they need it. So that's kind of one thing I would say is if you can put up those big fence, make sure that your coop at night especially is very, very secure and tight because that is mostly when a predator, especially all those nocturnal ones, are going to come. Raccoons, fox, skunks. Skunks will generally come for the eggs and then they'll come for a chicken. So just keep an eye out on that, especially if you have one chicken disappear. Know that that predator is coming back for more chickens. So just kind of keep a proactive eye on that. Let's see. Are the blood spots okay to eat? Yeah, you can totally eat them. If they gross you out, you can scoop them out, but they're fine to eat. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Okay, so starting out with baby chicks. So chicks do not produce enough body heat to keep themselves alive. So you need to add additional heat. They have a few different kinds. They have panel heaters, which I really recommend as opposed to a heat lamp. You can definitely use a heat lamp. It's usually a lot safer because you're keeping an eye on it much more often. But they have panel heaters that are long and flat. They do cost a bit more, probably around $60 as compared to a heat lamp, which is probably more around the 30 to 40 range with the bulb and everything. The benefit to a panel heater is you can also fold them flat so the chickens can go underneath them or out, and then you can set them up. They have different legs that change based on what you need. But you want to have a big enough space in your brooder where chicks can move towards the heat to stay warm and then move away from the heat to cool down. The bedding is very, very important. So you can use the chips that are shown in this picture right here. Those are pine chips. You can get them from any local farm store. You can also use these pellets. So these are like the same kind that you would put into a wood burning stove. And those work well if you want to keep like just a they'd spread less. So when you open up a whole bunch of the shavings, generally they end up kind of everywhere, where the pellets seem to stay a bit more contained. Keep an eye on the pellets because once they get stirred up, they can get pretty dusty. You want to make sure there's always plenty of food and water for the chicks. And when you first put them in, take a couple of your chicks and gently dip their beaks. Don't drown them, just gently dip their beaks in the water, and they'll tell their friends where to find water source from there on out. Okay, the quality chick starter feed is very, very important. First, you really need the thick bedding, like I said, because your chicks are learning to stand and they're developing their legs. If they slide out all the time, they will end up having what's called splay leg, splay foot for a chicken, and they'll have crooked legs. You have to brace them. It's a hard thing to do. It's easy to prevent. Have high quality feed and thick bedding at the bottom of your brooder. Okay, I have to keep going. I'm going to run out of time here. Okay, so moving on to the coop. So coops can come in all different sizes and shapes. You want to keep a general rule of having 1.5 to 2 square feet of floor space per adult chicken. Make sure there's proper air circulation. It's important to not be drafty, especially in Utah winters. As long as you have a fairly sealed with just a bit of air circulation so that they aren't getting too strong of fumes from any waste. They're generally okay in the winter without any additional heat. So keep them dry, keep them not drafty, and they group together in their roosts at night and they should be fine. The chickens also roost all next to each other. And you have to keep in mind that as chickens are sleeping, that's generally when they are pooping. So wherever you put your roosts is where you're going to end up with a bunch of waste buildup underneath it. So you never want to put your feed and water underneath your roosts. And that's something to kind of calculate as you're creating your own coop space. It's really nice for them to be able to have some outdoor access. You can do things like a chicken tractor where they're all penned in and your coop moves every day. So they're getting fresh grass or fresh dirt to scrape through every day. Or you can have just one solid location and let them out all the time. You do definitely need to lock them up every night. Generally, even in city areas, you want to keep that closed at night because you'll have raccoons or other things that'll try to get in and get your chickens. Okay, let's see. I'm making sure I didn't forget anything. So this is the perches or the roosts that I was talking about. You want to have 6 to 10 inches of length for each chicken that you have. They will group together like they do on this, like they are in this picture. Offer a couple different places because generally they'll have 2 or 3 that group here and 2 or 3 that group there together. Nesting boxes are important. You want them to at least be 12 by 15 inches. You don't want them to be really big or they won't use it. Chickens will generally find these on their own if you set them up. It naturally will come to them to figure out this is where I should be laying eggs. Make sure that you have clean and dry shavings, or you can use straw or you can use hay. One tip I like to use is alfalfa. So in the winter especially, I'll use a sheet of alfalfa, just a flake of alfalfa as the bedding because they eat those additional leaves for additional protein throughout the winter as well. They have these bedding that this type of bedding in feed stores that are in the picture. They're pretty expensive. It's generally a lot cheaper to just buy a bale of straw, buy a bale of hay, buy a bale of alfalfa than it is to buy a pack of these. These are more like $30 and there's only a few in there. So just keep that in mind. They have rollout boxes. So if you're shopping for chicken coops, a rollout box means that as your chicken lays the egg rolls out so that it doesn't get dirty, it doesn't get pecked, that type of thing. Okay, feed production. Got 5 minutes. Sorry, I'm trying to stay at pace and have time for questions. So feed production, just keep a really close eye on the ingredients that are listed on every single one. Especially for your chicks, you want to keep those protein percentages really, really high. So keep them at the 20 to 20, like no lower than 20%, especially on your meat chickens, because otherwise their legs and support will not develop. So keep the protein very high on the younger chickens. If you want to take it easier on your older chickens, if you're trying to save a little bit of money and not buy a high protein content feed for them, that's okay, but you will see a reduction in your eggs. Chickens are nice in that you can change feed automatically, so you don't need to fade in or fade out the chicken feed, like mix some and then do a new one. You can be completely out of feed and start a completely new feed the next day, and it's no problem. There are different types of feed, so you can get crumbles, which looks like this, or you can end up with pellets, which looks a lot like these same pellets that you use for bedding. I prefer the mini pellets. You can go with whichever one you want from that fits your chicken's needs the best. So if you have bantams, you're probably going to want to do a crumble or a small pellet, not the extra large pellet. You can get them cheaper at directly from a feed mill. So look where you live and identify a local feed mill, and you can generally get a higher quality feed for a lesser price than the low quality feed at your local farm store. So just keep an eye out for that. Convenience wise, farm store feed is great. Just know that you might be paying a bit more for that. Okay. Let me make sure I've got enough time here. Yeah. Okay. So feeding recommendations, like we've been talking about, we just talked about the mash versus crumbles versus pellets. Grit, you can add to your chicken's diet. They need that to help develop in their crop. It helps grind down all the feed. You can add scratch. So scratch is going to be very tempting at the feed store because it's the most cost-effective bag of 50 pounds that you can buy, but it is not a complete feed. So you can do that to add to places where they are scavenging, where they're free-ranging, but don't plan on that being their only food source. You can add oyster shell if your chicken's eggs are starting to be weaker, and you can mix it with their feed, and you can use it to help strengthen those shells. Okay, and then keeping things clean. So there's a couple of things that you'll notice from chickens. Chicken lice is not that big of a deal because it doesn't transfer from chickens to humans, and it doesn't harm them that much. It's not that big of a deal. Chicken mites are a big problem. So chicken mites are going to be teeny tiny red dots that you'll see around your coop and on your chickens. You'll notice if they start shaking their head a whole bunch, if they start just being very lethargic. And generally that comes from intermixing with wild birds. So if you have free range chickens, you're kind of opening yourself up to a whole bunch of potential parasites that you need to keep an eye out for. It is still definitely worth free ranging your birds. So don't let me scare you away from that by telling you that. One of these things that I really like is the garden poultry dust that you can use. I use this once or twice a year, once in the fall, once in the spring, as needed. And you can dust your chickens with it. Wear protective over your face, wear protective clothing over your face and hands and gloves. But you can just go ahead and dust under your chicken's wings, on their back, with that type of thing. The other thing that's a great preventative measure is diatomaceous earth. So each time you clean out your coop, which I recommend also probably at least twice a year, once in the fall, once in the spring, clean it all the way out. Spray it down with a bleach solution, let it air dry, and then dust it down with diatomaceous earth. So that can help a lot with pest prevention. So I just want to say, make sure that you are checking into reliable resources. There's a whole bunch of stuff on chickens out there, from blogs to Facebook pages to everything, and the content can be mixed. So make sure that you're getting your information from very reliable sources like Extension. We have Backyard Poultry Biosecurity. We have more all over our Extension website, and our two specialists are Melanie Stock and David Frame. So be sure to check those out. And I think that's it. Do you have questions for me? Got three
So,
in.
yeah,
Okay.
we got three really quick, Kelsey. So is there any egg color dependency on diet and micronutrients?
So the yolk color will change as long as they're getting all those additional things that they'll find free range or scrap food that you feed them. The yolk color will change. The outside of the egg is purely breed based, and it will darken if you give them a break over the winter. They'll come back stronger. Through the summer, that color will fade.
Perfect.
Um,
About grit, when do you add it to their diet?
Grit, you really only need if they're not free range. If they're not free range, just have it loose in their in another feeder in their coop, and they'll eat it when they need it. So you don't have to worry about, are they getting enough? If they're free ranging, you really don't need to worry about it. What do you do about a hen that wants to sleep in the nest box? Problem with poop in the box? Yeah. Oh, not broody birds. Oh, that's really tricky. You can try to break them of the habit by putting them on the roost every night. But generally, the only two things that I've had that work are moving them right when the sun goes down, take them out of the box, put them on the roost, try to put them somewhere kind of unfamiliar and facing a different direction, and then change their light amount. So you can add more light to your coop for longer, and they'll go to bed at a different time, which will change their habit.